Society has one Russ Bullock, who also is very popular, and whereas keeping the two Russes' names straight was apparently difficult for many members at the meeting, it has been resolved that henceforth Russ Bullock shall be known heretofore as the other Russ. And whereas the hotel shuttle does not run after 10 p.m., who knew? And whereas Byron and his party of 8 distinguished SON friends found themselves at a downtown restaurant at 11:30 p.m. and whereas Byron always travels with his posse of students by a minivan, and whereas Byron suggested a solution to the transportation problem by offering to telephone his students and have one of them pick him up, whereas Byron was not sure what room he was staying in, Byron would like to apologize to the obviously confused and bewildered person he woke up in room 202 at 11:30 p.m. requesting that he immediately come down to Asiago's Italian restaurant and give us all a ride home. Was you? And whereas our soiree to the vineyards and river required the use of 3 large buses, and whereas 2 of the 3 buses had air conditioning, many SON members were acutely aware of the awkward irony of being on a coach that was apparently on loan from a local church and bound for a heavenly destination, but was indubitably as hot as hell. You were on that side. And whereas the activities were sufficiently fun to ignore the nuisance of squeaky shoes and soggy bottoms, and whereas at the rafting trip the graduate students and younger members of the society gazed upon the older members of the society with bemused incredulity at their seemingly dysfunctional sense of fashion. Whereas these same students were overheard to have said, "Long pants and button-down shirts, man, that's gotta be uncomfortable." And that must surely give them a rash. And whereas many older and wiser members of the society are appreciative of the concern these pants-wearing, shirt-wearing older members of the society had for all of us, by not forcing us to avert our eyes to the sight of them shirtless or pantless, or perhaps worse, donning the fashions of their graduate students. And whereas the Education Committee did resolve to task themselves with expanding and updating nematode-related entries on Wikipedia.com, and whereas the majority of our river guides did gain an extraordinary preparatory knowledge of nematodes from Wikipedia.com, alas, the nematological information content of Wikipedia is still insufficient to prevent the generation of many a foul joke by post-pubescent river guides. You didn't get our guide, apparently. And whereas one young rafting participant chose to depart their raft, and whereas this participant was approaching the prospects of navigating the whitewater rapids in nothing but a life jacket, and whereas members of another boat came upon this young swimmer and asked if the swimmer would like to get into the boat, and whereas the young occupant responded, "I don't want to die," it was resolved to pull the young swimmer into the raft. True story, right? Whose raft was that? Yeah. And whereas it is now apparent that Richard Sikora has reached a new orbit in his ascension to nematological stardom, several of the Society's graduate students commented on his most important achievement as serving as a human shield from irrigation sprinklers along the Greenway and from rogue waves across the bow of their raft. There's a contribution. Whereas each rafting participant received proper training on how to pull another person in the raft, and whereas T.J. Bliss was tasked with pulling another member of his raft into his boat, and whereas T.J. successfully pulled the said member onto the edge of the raft, and whereas the river raft guide